everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another true crime video and the conclusion of the Stephen Koecher case. I know part 1 of this case came out just recently, so if you missed it, you haven't seen it yet, it's linked in the description box. I've also created a playlist of my personal favorite videos that I've done, the cases I really enjoyed digging into, my favorite series, etc. I know that a lot of people like to listen to my videos when they're resting or, at night, so I thought you might like a playlist of the videos that I most enjoyed researching and creating. There are some series in there, there's some Halloween videos, some regular videos, etc. So that will be linked in the description box as well. I just wish there was a way I could add like an explanation in there to tell you why each is my favorite, because there's some really interesting backstories behind the scenes there, but I may make a little video going through the playlist and telling those stories to my Patreons, because I don't know any other way that I could do it. Anyways, I'm super excited to continue talking about the still unsolved disappearance of 30-year-old Stephen Koecher, but before we get started, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. I think most of us already know about Magellan TV. They've been a sponsor to this channel for a long time, and I appreciate them for that. But I also appreciate the service they provide, which is a really amazing place to go to stream some of the best documentary films and series in the world. Magellan TV has over 3,000 options to choose from, and they add more every single week, so you'll never run out of new things to watch that are not only entertaining, but educational. On that note, I have a recommendation for you on Magellan TV that just dropped. It's called Whispers in the Dark. The caption tells us that in 2007, serial rapist Johannes Mauers was arrested. He led police to a burrow where he was keeping 2 young girls. This sensitive film tells the story of both girls and their kidnapper. So I'd never heard of this guy before, and I love that Magellan TV is always introducing me to true crime cases that are new to me, but this one was just so shocking. It happened in South Africa. I don't want to give too much away, but I was shook throughout this entire film. So if you already have Magellan TV, as I know a lot of you do, check it out. If you don't have Magellan TV yet, now is as good a time as any to sign up, as Magellan TV is offering viewers of my channel 30% off an annual membership, which will give you an entire year for less than $3.50 a month. Simply click the link in the description box to redeem the special offer today. And it's not just true crime that you can watch on Magellan TV. We're all three-dimensional people. Yes, we're interested in true crime, but there's so much more to us. Magellan TV has amazing documentaries about nature, science, history, and so much more, all available ad-free, and many streaming in 4K with no additional cost to you. You can watch on your phone, tablet, computer, smart TV, Roku, Apple TV, Chromecast, and the list goes on and on. There never has to be any time or place that you can't enjoy all the amazing films and series that Magellan TV has to offer. So click the link in the description box and start watching today. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video, and let's dive in. When we last left off, Stephen Koecher was still missing. His family had pretty much searched for him on their own without much help from law enforcement for the first 2 weeks. And then once the police realized that he probably wasn't just hanging out in Vegas, getting drunk and stumbling from casino to casino, they assigned detectives to his case, both in Henderson, Nevada, where his car was found abandoned on December 13th, and in St. George, Utah, where Stephen lived, renting a room in a house owned by a man named Brett Bishop. And these detectives began going door to door in the Sun City Anthem neighborhood where Stephen's car had been found, even though Stephen's dad already did that. And the detectives were interviewing people that Stephen had known, such as his landlord, Brett Bishop, and another young man that had also previously rented a room in Brett's home, Jordan Zirkle. While going door to door in the area where Stephen was last seen on a home surveillance camera, law enforcement encountered a woman who remembered that her neighbors across the street at 2260 Evening Lights had done a very quick job of moving out Sunday, December 13th. The very same day Stephen was last seen walking down Evening Lights before seemingly vanishing into thin air. The police tried to get into contact with the residents of this home, but it would be several weeks until they were able to, even though they'd knocked on the door and left flyers and their business cards expressing their interest and their desire and their need to speak with whoever lived at 2260 Evening Lights. They finally tracked down the homeowner, a man named Saverio DiMaggio, and he told them that he and his wife Maria had moved out of that house a few months prior, but their son Mark was still living in the casita, a small detached building behind the main house. So police obviously wanted to talk to Mark and ask him if he knew Stephen, if he'd seen Stephen, or if he'd seen anything strange in the area on Sunday, December 13th. So the police had been trying to talk to the DiMaggios since December 30th. They were finally able to talk to Saverio on January 13th at his new house at 2789 Rosenhardy Drive. That's just about 5 minutes away from the Evening Lights house. They told Saverio that they were trying to talk to his son Mark, and they paid the house another visit, the Evening Lights house, on January 15th, leaving another business card asking for an urgent callback, yet still they would not hear from Mark DiMaggio until February 18th of 2010, which is like 2.5 months from when they first focused on 2260 Evening Lights, and they first got that report from the neighbor across the street. December 30th, remember, that's when they started attempting to get a response from someone who lived at 2260 Evening Lights. But as we know, Mark was coming and going from this house during the time that law enforcement was trying to get in touch with him, because the flyers and the business cards that the police would leave at the door, they'd be removed. And there were different vehicles parked in the driveway from time to time. At the time that he finally spoke to law enforcement, Mark DiMaggio was a 41-year-old man, and the police met with him at 2260 Evening Lights, where they showed him pictures of Stephen Koecher, and they asked if Mark recognized him. Now, the police had several photos that they pulled off of Stephen's Facebook page, and when Mark looked at them, his response was, "I can't say that I have seen him," which means the same thing as "I don't think I've seen him." Kind of, but not really, right? Because it's phrased in an odd sort of way, don't you think? It's sort of an indirect response to a very direct question, in my opinion, because he didn't come right out and say, "No, I've never seen this guy." And sometimes when people are lying to the police, or, just lying in everyday life, they'll do this. They won't answer definitely yes or no. They'll make a vague response, because later, if it turns out that they actually did know the person and they said they didn't, it's clear that they lied to the police. But if they said, "Well, I can't say whether I have ever seen him or not," and it comes out later that they had seen him, the person could just defend themselves and say, "Well, I never said that I didn't see him. I said I couldn't say for sure whether I had or not," which isn't even what Mark said. He said, "I can't say for sure that I have seen him." It's just an odd way to say it, but maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. You tell me in the comments. What do you think? In the police report, it says that Mark DiMaggio appeared to be nervous when contacted and while being questioned about Stephen Koecher and his disappearance, but Mark would relax when he was talking about something else, like work, a work project. Mark also became evasive when the conversation turned to the subject of where he was actually living at the time that he was being interviewed in February of 2010. Mark told police that he had moved out of the Evening Lights house, so we can assume that it was his things being stowed away in a moving van on December 13th, since his parents had already moved out prior to that. But Mark did also say that he used the casita behind the Evening Lights house, and he was planning on moving back in there soon. When pressed further about where Mark was currently resting his head at night, he told the police that he doesn't tell anyone where he lives because he didn't have any friends in town, and he didn't trust anyone due to the drug lifestyle that people tend to have. So he would not tell police where he lived. Once again, this is a really odd sort of response. This neighborhood, it's an upscale 55-plus neighborhood. What drug lifestyle is Mark talking about exactly? Who's he referring to? Is he saying that everyone in Henderson is a junkie? Is he saying that the people who live in the Sun City Anthem area are junkies? And he, doesn't want to be involved with that stuff, so he doesn't make friends in Henderson? Right off the bat, I got Gage Bethune vibes. And if you watched my series on Praveen Varghese, you'll know what I mean. Someone who volunteers this information, someone who clutches their pearls and starts talking about how people who do drugs make them uncomfortable and they're way too pure and innocent to want to be wrapped up in that stuff, and that's not their scene. It's usually projection. Now, I'm not going to say anything about Mark DiMaggio. I'm not going to say that Mark DiMaggio was doing drugs or anything, but Let's take the example of Gage Bethune in the Praveen Varughese case. Gage Bethune told the police, oh, this kid made me uncomfortable. He was talking about getting cocaine. He, had earrings in his ears. Like, I don't know what these kind of people are capable of. And then it turns out that same night that Gage picked up Praveen and told the police he was scared because he heard Praveen talking about coke, that whole night, Gage was trying to procure his own coke. So it's projection. The police asked Mark DiMaggio if maybe Stephen had approached him looking for work, and Mark said that it didn't happen. So he didn't say no, or I don't think so. He said that didn't happen. Mark also said he had not seen any of the flyers with Stephen's face on them, nor had he seen Stephen's car parked in the cul-de-sac for 3 days. The cul-de-sac that was essentially steps away from 2260 Evening Lights. So the police said Mark was nervous, for the most part, but relaxed when he was talking about work. Well, what kind of work did he do? He told the police that he did research, and the project he was currently developing was a safety feature for bus stops to keep people from getting hit by cars while waiting for the bus. Admirable. Great idea. But Aaron Stoner, who has spent a lot of time on this case, we talked about him in the first video, and we're going to talk about him more in this video. From what he could find, as far as the official capacity of having a job, Mark DiMaggio worked as a handyman at a Sicilian restaurant. So somebody who you call in if a pipe bursts, or if the oven's not working, or if you have a leak in the ceiling or something like that. So I don't know who Mark worked for doing this research, or what kind of business he was setting up this new technology to prevent accidents at bus stops with. I don't know. It's not really clear. So Aaron Stoner, in one of his many videos on this case, he pointed out something that is important, I think, and makes a lot of sense. Stephen Koecher pulled into that cul-de-sac about 6 minutes before noon, but he stayed in his car until just before noon, and then he got out and started walking. Aaron said that it's his belief that Stephen was meeting someone in that neighborhood, and they'd probably planned to meet at noon, but the house he was going to couldn't have been far away, a far walk, because Stephen knew it would only take a minute to get from his car to whoever's house he was meeting at, or whoever he was meeting. In my opinion, taking it one step further, the fact that Stephen didn't park in the driveway of any specific house is an indication that he probably had previous communications with the person he was meeting, a back and forth, not just a message meet me here, and they had told him not to park in their driveway. Now, why would they not want Stephen to park in their driveway? Well, maybe because what he was doing wasn't on the up and up. Maybe it was something that the person wanted to keep on the down low, like drugs or something. So according to Mark DiMaggio, he moves out on December 13th, and he does not any longer live in the casita behind the house on 2260 Evening Lights. But he won't tell the police where he is living, which is kind of a red flag. He would only give them a P.O. box number in Pahrump, Nevada. Obviously, the police are also feeling some kind of way about Mark DiMaggio, as they stated that he appeared nervous when talking about Stephen. So they do some further investigation into him. But they don't do any further investigation for over 2 months. So it takes them 2 months to even get Mark DiMaggio in person. And then it takes them another 2 months after they talk to him for them to investigate into him further. So law enforcement in Henderson, they contacted the police department in Pahrump to see if they had any interactions with Mark DiMaggio on file. They did not. However, the police found that Mark DiMaggio owned 4 properties in the Pahrump area. And so on April 27th, 2010, the police drove out to Pahrump, and they sort of drove by these properties. They did not go into or onto these properties. They didn't bring police dogs or cadaver dogs or a forensics team. They didn't even walk around and check things out on the property, look inside the houses or, kind of see if there's any fresh holes anywhere. They just drove by and made notes. Now, apparently, according to Aaron Stoner and the Reddit community, Mark has a history of drugs and domestic violence. Now, I couldn't find this exact report, but it wouldn't surprise me if Mark did have some experience with drugs. I suspected it when he'd made the statement about not trusting people because they were into that drug lifestyle. I'm not saying that he does, and I personally can't find this report. Just once again, I don't have all of these fancy softwares and programs that people use to search up some of these things. I used to, but I used them so rarely that I couldn't really justify the very, very high cost. So if anybody has that report, let me know, and I will post it in the description box as a link for resources, for sources, for backup and evidence of what I'm saying. Just for the record, I'm not saying that Mark DiMaggio did have a criminal history. However, it has been said quite a bit online, and I do trust Aaron Stoner, even though I've never met him and never talked to him. He just really does such a good job. So I'm going to lean towards the direction of it being true, but without the sources that I have in my hands to properly back it up, I can't 100% go there. So the 4 properties that Mark DiMaggio owned in Pahrump, Nevada were 3691 Newberry Avenue, which was and still is a vacant lot, 5360 Lincolnwood Court, which was a vacant lot in April of 2010 when the police drove by it, but in 2016 a house was built on that land, so it's no longer a vacant lot. There was also 3720 Park Ridge Ave, and police talked to an elderly couple who either lived there at that house or lived in the neighborhood. The police showed this elderly couple a picture of Stephen, and the couple said they'd never seen him. Lastly, there was 2650 Galley Road, where police made contact with a woman who looked at Stephen's pictures and said she did believe she'd seen him somewhere. She just really couldn't put her finger on where or when. And this leads me to wonder if maybe that Galley Road property was where Mark DiMaggio was staying. Maybe Stephen had come and seen him there before, and that's why this woman recognized him, or maybe this woman just thought Stephen looked like, somebody else she knew, because he did have one of those faces, kind of. He just looked like a nice, clean-cut guy, walking down the street. He wouldn't stand out to you too much. All right, so the police talked to Mark DiMaggio. He says he doesn't want to tell them where he lives, and then they find out he owns 4 properties, and they go and drive by them. Okay. Now, the police have never been to these properties for a more thorough investigation, and that bothers me because they said Mark was nervous when they questioned him about Stephen. He was evasive. He wouldn't tell them exactly where he lived. They had to do their own research to find these properties. And then, as we know, Mark allegedly was living in a 250 square foot casita behind his parents' house, but he owned 4 properties, and 2 of them were vacant lots, undeveloped, which should have sent red flags up all over the place. Because let's just say, as a theory, not as an accusation or anything of the sort, let's say Stephen was in that area to meet with Mark DiMaggio. Let's say something went wrong, the interaction turned bad, and Stephen ended up dead. It would make sense that Mark would want to get out of that house as soon as possible, which would explain why the moving van pulled up that afternoon, the same afternoon Stephen went missing, and why Mark was out of that house within 3 hours. But boxes and belongings may not have been the only things that were removed from that house on the afternoon of Sunday, December 13th, 2009. A body could have easily been slipped into a van or a car and driven away, maybe that white van that the neighbor across the street saw that Sunday but never saw again. And if you're someone who has a body you'd like to make disappear and you also have properties that happen to be vacant lots that are up for sale that people might want to build houses on one day, maybe you might think that these vacant lot properties might be the perfect place to hide this body. The police never pursued this. They never even brought forensic teams or cadaver dogs into any of these 4 properties or into 2260 Evening Lights to see if there were signs that a murder had happened there or that a dead body had been in the house at one point. And this is very irresponsible, as I think they probably had enough to get a warrant, especially if they'd actually taken the initiative to get more evidence against Mark DiMaggio. Mark DiMaggio, a 40-year-old man who was a researcher, a property owner, and living in a 250 square foot casita on his parents' property. None of it adds up, but if Mark does have a history of drugs, it sort of does start to add up. There was also another lead that the police never followed up on. On December 20th, a resident on Evening Lights told police that they'd seen a car parked in front of 2260 Evening Lights on Sunday, December 13th, 2009. And this neighbor wrote down the plate number because this is a neighborhood with older people and they have an HOA and it's kind of bougie. I don't know a lot of people who would write down a plate number of a car sitting in their parking lot, besides me, of course, but that's because I'm the way I am. I don't know if I've ever told you, but once I brought my kid down to the bus stop and there was 6 cigarette butts sitting at the end of my driveway all next to each other, and it looked like they'd all kind of been smoked in one sitting and they had not been there the day before. And I was like, somebody is coming to the end of my driveway at night and watching me and stalking me or having me under surveillance. and they've been smoking cigarettes while they're doing that, like you see in the old black and white hard-boiled detective movies. But so I got worried, and I collected the cigarette butts with gloves, and I put them in a baggie, and I still have them in case anything ever happens to me. Tell them to check the baggie. So someone like me would do that, but most people, they're going about their day. They're not even home in the middle of the day, or it's Sunday and they're out doing fun things. They wouldn't even think twice to do that, but this neighbor did, so kudos to them. So this was a 2005 Toyota, and it was tracked back to a man named Corey Dwayne Drumright. And then that's kind of all the police have to say about Corey, right? Because according to the police reports, law enforcement never contacted Corey. And that might seem unbelievable, like, no, they probably just didn't put it in the report. But Aaron Stoner did contact Corey Dwayne Drumright, and he asked if the police had ever called him or tried to talk to him, and Corey said, no, they have not. They haven't called me. They haven't asked me for an interview. They haven't asked me what I was doing there that day. Nothing. So Aaron showed Corey Stephen's picture, and Corey said he didn't look familiar and he couldn't remember why Corey, had been on evening lights that day, since he didn't think he knew anyone there. Corey went through his computer to see if there was some sort of reason he might have been there, and he looked up the address on Google Maps, hoping it would sort of jog his memory to see the area. Corey told Aaron that two things were happening in 2009 that may have put him in that area. He said he believed he was living with someone at the time who resided in or around the Sun City Anthem area, and he was also working on a political campaign in December of 2009, and he was probably going door to door, passing out information about the campaign, campaigning, like, who are you going to vote for? How can we get your vote? I tell you what, though, if these political campaigners want to start bringing chocolate bars, I might spend more than 12 seconds asking them to get off my property. I might actually have a conversation with a chocolate bar in my hand. Other than that, Corey had nothing substantial to add initially, because Aaron had actually gone out to Corey's business. I guess he's a business owner, and he talked to him there. And Aaron said that Corey was very open. He was very willing to help. He seemed concerned about Stephen, but this was like 11 years after Stephen had gone missing. So, of course, Corey's memory isn't going to be super sharp. But an hour after Aaron left, Corey texted him and said, I was wrong. The friend I'd been living with at this time in December of 2009, it ends up that he lived further away than I thought. So I must have been in that area, that evening lights area, for political campaigning for an upcoming election. Now, Aaron did have a question, though, for residents of Las Vegas or Henderson. He wants people to see if they remember what campaign Corey could or would have been working on at this time, because he looked it up, and, the presidential elections had ended in 2008. The municipal elections in that area, the Henderson, Vegas area, they were over in June of 2009, and primary elections for governor wouldn't take place until summer of 2010. And would it be common for Corey to be going door to door half a year before these elections even took place? So if you're from this area or you lived in that area in 2009, drop it in the comments. Let me know what campaign you think he may have been working on, Corey Dwayne Drumright, because I think that's a valid question from Aaron Stoner. Let's put a pin in Mark DiMaggio for a moment, but we will come back to him when I tie everything together in my personal theory at the end. And let's move on to Stephen's landlord, Brett Bishop. Our story with Brett picks up years before Stephen Koecher went missing, in April of 2005, when a 2005 silver Porsche Cayenne Turbo, a car, or it's actually an SUV, that I believe at that time was valued at over $100,000. It was stolen from the front display area of a car dealership in Scottsdale, Arizona. The car was found to be missing, along with a spare set of keys, during a Monday morning inventory meeting, and apparently there were a bunch of other cars around this time stolen from the area, always high-end vehicles, luxury vehicles, always stolen from dealerships. One of the vehicles that had been stolen, a Lincoln Navigator, had turned up in New Mexico, and the person who was in possession of it told the police that they'd bought it on a street corner for a song. Like, way below retail value, which I guess should have been their first hint that it was stolen. Buying an expensive car on a street corner for a bargain. Not typically a transaction that's on the up and up, but okay. So this investigation's going on in 2005, and it's not connected to anyone specifically yet. And even at this time in 2005, the high-end luxury cars being stolen from dealerships weren't connected to each other, although I think there's a clear pattern, and it probably was the same person or more likely people who were doing this. The police basically said, we can't tie these together, but there was suspicion with these dealerships that employees who worked at the car wash that was connected to the dealerships, because some dealerships have car washes connected. Most do, actually, because if you buy a new car, they'll wash it and like detail it before they give it to you. So it was kind of a speculation in these dealerships that employees who are working in the car wash were the ones doing this. And if they weren't the ones actually stealing the cars, they were taking the keys when the cars went in for car washes. And instead of putting them back in the car or putting them back on the board where you hang the keys, they were selling the keys to people out on the street who would then come in and just drive away with the car at night. So that was kind of the speculation. Now, in August of 2009, 3 months before Stephen Koecher moved to St. George, police in a place called Orem, Utah, got an anonymous call telling them to check the garage of an address in Orem. This address was 311 West 170 North. This anonymous tip also told them to check the garage of 1734 Maplewood Way in St. George, Utah. This was the house that Stephen Koecher would eventually rent a room in, a house owned by Brett Bishop. And that Orem address, also owned by Brett Bishop, and apparently that's where he and his wife lived full-time. The anonymous tipster said that if the police were looking for a stolen silver Porsche SUV, they would probably find it at one of these two locations. In the police report, it says, quote, "I checked out the address of 311 West 170 North. This property is an upper-lower duplex with an unattached garage in the back. The backyard area is surrounded by a chain-link fence. 2 vehicles parked at this residence returned to Brett Bishop. I drove by on many different occasions trying to get a glimpse of the stolen Porsche or see if the garage was open. I did not feel confident in contacting the homeowner as it might tip him off to dispose of this vehicle, whether it was in Orem or St. George. I did not contact St. George PD for the same reason." End quote. Eventually, after talking to some people in this neighborhood, this Orem neighborhood, who'd seen the Porsche on more than one occasion, police did decide to reach out to Brett Bishop for some answers, and they went to his house on August 6th, 2009. A neighbor across the street told the police that Brett and his wife were out of town. They'd left a few days before, and they weren't due to be back until the next week. Once the whole neighborhood was clued into the fact that the police were sniffing around because they were all outside of his house, law enforcement decided that they needed to get a warrant and just kind of go into the garage that day so Brett wouldn't get tipped off by someone in the neighborhood. So they got a warrant for the garage. They went into the garage, and there it was, a silver Porsche Cayenne. But that's not all they found. One of the detectives found an Arizona license plate on a workbench near the vehicle, and remember, this car had been stolen from Arizona. They looked up the license plate and saw it had been registered to a 2006 Toyota Tundra, and in the report it says that it's unknown how the license plate ended up being in the garage of Brett Bishop. Unknown, but easy to assume. So they searched up the VIN number that was on the Porsche, and it came back negative, like it didn't exist. So then the cops were like, oh, we see, this is a fake VIN number, and then they took a knife and they peeled up this VIN sticker, which had been placed over the real VIN number, and the real VIN number was tracked to the stolen Porsche Cayenne. While they were in the garage doing this, the detectives smelled marijuana coming from a cupboard in the garage, and inside of it, they found some weed, scales for weighing weed, pipes for smoking weed, rolling papers for weed, heavenly blue seeds for growing weed, and a California medical cannabis card in the name of Brett Bishop. There was also a large gun case in the garage that held a wide range of firearms, a Star 9mm handgun, a New England .223 with a scope, numerous boxes of ammo, all different kinds. I mean, take your pick, this guy had them all, and a homemade silencer. In this cupboard, the police also found many prescription bottles bearing the names of multiple people, none of which were Brett Bishop. Some of these prescriptions were in pill form, some liquid form, meaning that they were meant to be injected. They were mostly narcotics, hydrocodone, Percocet, morphine. There were also things like muscle relaxers and Valium, all the good stuff that has a high street value. Just saying, don't come for me. Don't come for me, Brett. Don't do it, man. In another room, police found several more firearms. A Ruger .22 handgun that had a threaded barrel, meant for that homemade silencer that Brett had, a loaded Beretta 12-gauge shotgun, a Ruger .22 rifle, a Marlin .22 rifle, a Winchester rifle, and another Marlin rifle, and a Jennings .22 pistol. So we got some weed. Okay, no big deal. But then we have a bunch of guns and ammo. And as a gun owner, listen, I support the Second Amendment, but damn, who needs that many guns and that much ammo and a homemade silencer. Who does? Someone who's up to no good. That's who. I mean, honestly, it's just pretty scary. And then there's this Porsche that was stolen 4 years before in Arizona. And listen, I know that there's going to be some people in the comments who are like, it's not Porsche. It's Porsche. I'm not saying Porsche. That sounds so pretentious. I'm going to say Porsche, okay? I know it's not the right way to say it. I know. Saying Porsche sounds super pretentious. As an American girl, I'm going to say Porsche. Just like I say Audi instead of Audi. So they found that one Arizona plate, right? And then they found a bunch of other license plates just hanging out loose in the garage from all different states: Arizona, Nevada, Kentucky, Utah, and all the Utah plates came back as not registered. And this usually means that they were from cars that had been totaled and, like sent to the junkyard. And while the police were there processing the scene, all these people were walking up and talking to them, and like kids and stuff. And the kids were like, is that car stolen? We all knew he had it, but he rarely drove it. And we all kind of figured something sketchy was going on with it because he's had it for like years and he never really drives it. And why would Brett Bishop have such a beautiful, expensive vehicle and not drive it? Well, because he knew it was stolen. Allegedly, in my opinion, don't come for me. And then you have all these prescription bottles, but they aren't in Brett Bishop's name, right? They're in all these other people's names. How did Brett Bishop get them? Now, we're going to get our answers from a man named Mark Patay, a business owner and the most recent employer of Brett Bishop. Mark had known Brett for roughly 6 years, and their relationship started when Brett had volunteered at Mark's company, a company called United Off-Road Rock Crawlers. Brett's job at this company was to help set up and organize events, and according to Mark Patay, Brett was invaluable in this capacity. He seemed to always have time to devote as a volunteer. He was thorough. He did a good job. Now, this business would go on to fail, so Mark and a business partner named Ranch Pratt, it's like the coolest name ever, Ranch Pratt. He should be like a Western movie star from like the 50s. But anyways, Mark and Ranch, they decided to open another business. They started a closed-door pharmacy, and they brought Brett Bishop along with them because he'd always been a reliable and hard worker. Now, a closed-door pharmacy, according to healthmart.com, is not open to the general public. Instead, it delivers prescription medication to various patients residing in different settings, most commonly long-term care settings like hospitals and assisted living facilities and youth centers. Brett Bishop had been involved in this closed-door pharmacy for a few years by the time 2009 rolled around, but something happened that caused his position at the pharmacy to change. His responsibilities at the pharmacy were many and varied. He was responsible for going through these binders and seeing which medications needed to be filled and at which, locations they needed to be filled for, which patients, etc. And then he would have to order these medications, and then they would arrive to the pharmacy in bulk. And at that point, they'd be sorted and separated into 30-day supplies by various employees at the company. Ranch Pratt said that Brett was around these medications all day, every day, and once they were sorted, he would deliver them to where they needed to go. But in April of 2009, the company had gotten an anonymous email warning them about one of their delivery guys who was ripping the company off. They did not give Brett's name, but they did give a description, which led back to Brett Bishop. In the police report, it says, quote, Mark, and they're talking about Mark Patay, Mark stated the decision was made to let Brett go. Even though this seems to have been done, Brett has maintained a working relationship with this pharmacy business, end quote. Okay, so I don't know who called this tip in. It's anonymous. I think it was probably somebody who worked at or lived at one of these extended care facilities or long-term care facilities that the pharmacy was delivering to. Maybe some patients were like, hey, I only got 2 out of my 3 medications today, and this became like a pattern. And the person who worked there or lived there was like, okay, who's the person who's delivering these medications when they're missing? And they traced it back to Brett. But then Mark Patay was like, oh, we let Brett go, but he didn't really, because according to the police report, Brett still maintained a working business relationship with the pharmacy, so he was still doing something for them, which seems kind of crazy if you have an employee who's doing not only something that's bad for your business, but illegal and reflects poorly on your business, that you would let him stay on in any way, shape, or form, or even want any sort of relationship with him. But what do I know? Ranch Pratt also told police that there was no place in Brett's job description where he should have been in possession of any medication from the pharmacy. The prescriptions he had seemed to be outdated, but the question was how Brett had gotten them and how long he'd had them. There was speculation that a rest home or a care center may have been giving Brett outdated medications for disposal, but Ranch Pratt was clear with the police when he said that this was not an accepted or usual practice, not for Brett Bishop, not for the pharmacy, or for the centers who had possibly given him the medications. And even if this had happened, Brett would have known that the approved method for disposing of these prescriptions was to bring them to the pharmacy's main office in Layton, not keep them and then bring them home. Okay, we're going to go back to what happened to Brett once everything hit the fan, but first I want to refer to a portion of Aaron Stoner's interview with Stephen Koecher's old roommate, Jordan. So Jordan said that when he originally moved into Brett Bishop's St. George house, no one else lived there. He had just broken up with his girlfriend and all of his family were back in Chicago where he was originally from, so he needed to quickly find a place to live, and he responded to an ad in the paper advertising a vacation home rental. And basically the owner was like, this is really going to be easy. This is going to be great. I just need someone to keep an eye on the place because I'm only there 1 or 2 times a year. Now remember that, okay? Remember that the advertisement said that Brett Bishop only went to the St. George house 1 or 2 times a year.
And like when I originally moved into the house, so like I moved into the house, no one lived there. It said I was dating this girl.
Okay.
We broke up, and I needed a place to go because I didn't have no family out there.
Right.
I'm from Illinois, and so I had no family out there. So in the paper it said vacation home rental. Need someone to look over the property. I'm only here 2 times a year, and I called the number, and that's how I got to. Then I went and met Brett, and then I moved in. Like a week after that, I met him.
Jordan moved in a week after responding to the ad, and he said that even though he knew Brett had a wife and kids, Jordan had never met any of them. They never came to the house. Brett never brought them there while Jordan was living there. But he did see Brett quite a bit. The first day Jordan moved in, he was shocked when he walked into the living room and saw something like 100 guns laid out. Jordan thought, maybe Brett's a big game hunter. Like, there's a lot of them around this area. And so it would make sense that all of these guns would be in his possession, I guess. And I guess it would make sense that they'd all be out in the open because Brett was moving his stuff out so that Jordan could move his stuff in.
With the first day that I moved into that house, like I got my stuff, I got off work. I used to work at Weathermaster Doors and Windows there in Washington, Utah.
Okay.
And I get to the house and I literally walk in the front door. There was like literally 100 guns in the living room.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there was like 100 guns in the living room. He told me he was getting all the stuff out of his house, and I didn't think nothing of it. He's moving everything. I'm moving in, so he's moving all his stuff out. But there was like 100 guns all over the living room. They were all laid out like he had them, and then he was loading them.
So like all of these hundreds of guns that are laying around, like did he ever explain what that was about, or?
No, like I just figured like the way he explained like in the thing, like in his thing, it was a vacation home. Like I just figured he had, because he kind of like when I first met him, he kind of like acted like he was big time money dude, like had money out his ass. Like that's how he portrayed himself when I first met that first day I met him. Like so I just figured, hey, he got money, he can afford all this stuff. Like Utah, most of the people I know in Utah are big hunters or big game hunters. So like I figured that's what he was, like, because a lot of the guns were big guns. Like they weren't no little toy guns. They were some big guns.
But it definitely still took Jordan by surprise a bit. Because, I mean, he walked into the living room and you see like 100 guns just laid out on the floor and the couch, just laid out. And yeah, it's scary. Now, during Jordan's time at Brett Bishop's house, he had access to the whole house except for the master bedroom, which was kept locked, and the garage that was kept locked. One day, Jordan came home from work and the garage was open, and he says that he saw a silver Porsche inside, but he never saw Brett actually driving the vehicle.
But when I moved into the house, I had no access to the garage or the bedroom, but I had access to the whole house. Well, I came home from work one day early, and the garage door was open, and that's when I seen the Porsche, like the Porsche that you're talking about.
Yeah.
He never drove that Porsche. He told me that Porsche has been sitting in that garage since 2005. Like it's never been in a parking lot since 2005 or nothing. Like, I'd never seen that Porsche leave the garage until when he got in trouble for it being stolen.
Yeah. So you knew about the Porsche getting stolen then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew that he had a Porsche and he had a square body truck in the garage. There was a square body Ford truck, big old truck, and the Porsche in the garage. Like, I never actually walked into the garage.
Oh, I wonder if Jordan called in the tip about the Porsche. That just occurred to me. Oh. Okay, so Jordan said the garage door was never open unless Brett was there. And then even when he was there, Brett usually wouldn't leave it open while he was like inside of it. Brett would come to the house, he would stop by unannounced, and he'd be doing something in there, and sometimes Jordan would get a peek. Jordan remembered he also saw an old Ford square body truck in there from time to time, and Brett certainly came to the house more than 1 or 2 times a year. Jordan only lived there for a few months, but he saw him constantly. I think he said upwards of like 20 times. And it was always unannounced, and at the strangest times in the middle of the night, like 1 or 2 a.m.
But I've been there a couple times that he was there. And, like, when I moved in, he told me that he was only there 1 to 2 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, literally, I lived there for, like, 3 months or, like, a couple months before Steven moved in. No one lived there prior to Steven living there. It was me and Steven were the only ones that lived there the whole time I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Brett used to show up at the house, like, at random times of night, like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, we'd be, like, just show up out of the blue. Like, he's only supposed to be there like twice a year, but this dude was literally coming like all the time. Like, he just show up out of the blue, like at the weirdest times, and he would always be in a different car.
Jordan said that Brett would come to the house and he always had this little like toiletry bag with a zip on top. He never put it down, and when he walked, you could hear pills rattling around in the bottles inside of it.
And, like, what I was saying about the pills, though, like, so Brett used to carry, you know, like those leather shower bags. Like, if you travel, you have those little, like, carry-on travel bags.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Brett used to carry one of those filled with pills, and how I knew it was pills is every time he would walk, you could hear the fucking things in the bottles. It was just like a small leather shower bag with a single zip up top, and every time you seen Brett, you seen that bag, and it was always full with pills, and like it was always like Brett was just like sketchy, and like
Jordan said that he doesn't believe these were pills that Brett was delivering for the pharmacy in an official capacity because it was a small bag and he always had it on him. It seemed more like a personal stash.
These pills that he's carrying in this bag, do you think that those are the pills that he's supposed to deliver for the company he's working for? Because he was doing pill delivery, prescription delivery for...
I don't know about that. Cause, like, this was like his carry-on bag, so like if he was carrying for a company, I think it would be like it'd have to be a larger scale bag to do this. Like, this was a small bag, like it was personal, like just the way, like, you know, like it was like his personal stuff. Like you said, I heard that he stole pills and all this stuff, but like it'd have to be a bigger sale for him to do like this. This was a small bag, and it was just, and he always had it on him, like that thing. Everywhere you seen him, he had that bag, and you could always just hear by when he walked, just the pills and the bottles in the bag. Like especially like because my bed, like you went down the hallway and you had the master bedroom, which was Brett, and it turned, and then Stevens was over here, and my room was over here. My and like walking down the hallway, you just hear him to his room. You could hear he always had pills on him.
Jordan also said that Brett would show up at the house, he'd stay for a few hours, he'd mess around in the garage or in the master bedroom, and then he would leave and spend all day or several days at the Arizona Strip.
And then he would leave, and he would go spend days and hours upon hours out at the Arizona Strip.
Now, I don't know much about this area because I've never even heard of it, so I just did some quick research on it for this video. But if anybody's familiar with the Arizona Strip and what people do there, tell us in the comments what people do there. Because from what I can tell, people that go and hang out there, they're not doing anything legit. So the Arizona Strip is the part of Arizona lying north of the Colorado River. It's pretty much just desert, and portions of it are, on the Utah border, in Utah, etc. Many people go out there to do like drag racing and stuff. It's very sparsely populated and is only connected to the rest of Arizona by limited highway links. It does, however, have multiple road links to Utah, and as a result, this region has stronger economic and cultural ties to Utah than it does to Arizona. 4 primary unpaved roads enter the core of the Strip from Mesquite, Nevada, St. George, Utah, Colorado City, Arizona, and Fredonia, Arizona. All 4 are dirt/gravel roads and should not be driven by vehicles with low ground clearance because it's very wild, very overgrown area, which means it's dangerous. Now remember, Stephen lived in St. George. Brett Bishop's house was in St. George. According to Jordan, the way to get to the Arizona Strip, it's like 5 minutes from that house. And on one of Stephen's unexplained long drives, he was in Mesquite. So besides just driving through this Arizona Strip, maybe some drag racing, what do people at the Arizona Strip do that would cause Brett Bishop to be there all day or for several days? Now that's a good question because according to the internet, because the Strip is so far from any major population area, hardly anyone goes there unless they're like driving through or they're headed for the north rim of the Grand Canyon or Bryson Zion National Park in southeastern Utah. That's why people go there. They don't go there to like hang out. That's why I need you guys, if you're familiar with it, to let me know what people do there. And Jordan said that Brett would always show up to the house driving different cars, usually rental vehicles. He showed up one day in a Hummer, he went into the garage, he got a bag of stuff, put it in the Hummer, and then left for a few days to the Arizona Strip. A couple days later, Jordan got home from work and saw the Hummer, but it was smashed on the top, and Brett told him that he had rolled it on the Strip, the Arizona Strip.
And about the Hummer, okay, so he showed up in a Hummer. He showed up in the Hummer, and he came inside the garage, got a big old bag of stuff, came out, put it in the Hummer, and then he left for like 1 to 2 days. He was gone for like 2 days in the Hummer. I came out the next morning and to go to work, and I always parked on the side of the house where the gravel went. He had the concrete and the gravel on the side where the fence was. I always parked because I had a big old truck.
Mm-hmm.
I parked on the side, and I go to walk out, and the Hummer was already sitting in the driveway with the top smashed. Brett rolled it. He was out at the Arizona Strip, and he had rolled it. And then he had walked all the way back and got that big old Ford truck that was in the garage, and he did all that. And when I came out the next morning, the Hummer was already in the driveway smashed.
Jeez.
And that was like an Enterprise rental car.
Jordan said Brett was sketchy. He always had been since the first day he'd met him, and even Jordan's friends would comment about how weird and off Brett was. Jordan also said that Brett had told him he had an Arizona license plate and he would use it when he was driving all these different vehicles around.
So what's this Arizona Strip you're talking about?
Right, okay, so we know where the house is.
Yeah.
You know where the house is?
Mm-hmm.
So if you follow that road out, that main road that goes out where it goes out to like Sun Rock, all those rock companies.
Yeah.
Like all the masonry companies out there in the industrial area, if you keep going straight, it turns into the desert. That's the Arizona Strip.
Mm.
So like Brett would go spend days upon days out there, and he would always rent Jeeps, Hummers, all that stuff from rental companies. Like he never brought the family to the house the whole time I lived there. Like I never met any of his kids, his wife, none of that. Just the way he was, like he would just show up at the random times and hours. He was just like a sketchy as hell. Like everything he told me from the beginning of moving in until I moved out of there was all a lie. Like he showed up all the time. Like in like the first month I was there, I literally seen him like at least 20 fucking times. Like he was just show up at the weirdest time too. Like, and he was always in a rental company car, never in his car. Like I don't even know if he owned a car besides that Porsche or that truck. So, because every time, but I will tell you this, he did have in the garage. He told me about it because every time he would come and he would drive the truck, he had this plate. It was an Arizona plate. Mm-hmm. And like, those things were registered for like a long time, and that's how he drove all the vehicles that were at the house. Like I never seen the Porsche leave, but that's how he drove all those vehicles that were at the house is with that Arizona plate. And then he would go out to the Arizona Strip and spend hella time out there, like. And I've been out on the Arizona. We used to drag race, like race cars out on the Arizona Strip and stuff. And if you get caught doing anything out there, you can go to jail for like anything. Like it's not a place you just go hang out. Like it's kind of like Area 51 in its own sense.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, just maybe, what Jordan thought were rental cars were actually stolen cars. Right? Maybe Brett Bishop would bring those cars out to the Arizona Strip where there's like a little garage in the middle of the desert and they put fake VIN numbers over the real VIN numbers. You know, maybe that's what was going on. I don't know, just a theory, not accusing anyone of anything. Mark Patay, Brett's boss, had some suspicions about Brett and he called the police about a conversation that he'd had with Brett on August 7th, 2009, the day after the police raided Brett's garage in Orem, Utah. Apparently, Mark rented an airplane hangar at the Spanish Fork Airport, and Brett had called him and asked if he could store a vehicle in that hangar. Mark said he didn't know why Brett would want to put a car in the hangar as opposed to parking it at his house, and Brett never gave him any more information about why he wanted to do that. Maybe there was another stolen car in one of Brett's other garages that he wanted to get out of the garage before the police raided that. Maybe it was the St. George property that the car was in the garage of, and Brett knew that the police had a St. George address and they might go and check there next. Who knows? Just a theory. So of course the police are going to ask Brett, like, if you didn't steal this car, this Porsche, where did you get it from? And the story that Brett gave them was pretty funny. So Brett said that he got the Porsche from someone named TJ, but this person would also sometimes go by the name Tom Jones. And Brett didn't know where TJ was or how to find him. But Brett did know that TJ's date of birth was December 2nd, 1974, which just so coincidentally happened to be the exact date as Brett Bishop's own birthday, right? So Brett said he had last spoken to TJ in February of 2007, and TJ had called Brett from a Tennessee number. But Brett was like, I don't know where this dude went. I just got the car from him. Yo, Brett knew that car was stolen, okay? That's the thing that bothers me. Even if you're not admitting that you yourself stole it, you knew you were in possession of a stolen vehicle because you didn't drive it that often. You hid it in your garage for, like 4 years, and you would rarely take it out to drive it because you knew it was stolen, okay? And that's why you had all those other license plates there. But anyways, he knew. Allegedly. Brett also had numerous arrests on his record, third-degree felony for fraud and false statements in St. George, third-degree felony larceny charge, but eventually it seemed that all of these had either been dismissed or reduced to non-felonies. Now let's talk about Brett Bishop's wife, Tina Bishop, who I am only talking about and bringing her into this video because she made herself a focus in this case when she started posting about it within a week of Stephen Koecher disappearing. Tina would post specifically on 2 different websites, Slick Deals and Web Sleuths. On Slick Deals, she went by the name Nikayla, and on Web Sleuths, she went by the handle Still Looking. And when she talks about her husband Brett in these posts, she refers to him as DH, which just means dearest husband. It's like online shorthand. For the purposes of this video, when I talk about what she wrote, I'm just going to call her Tina and him Brett. In a December 19th Slick Deals post, Tina said that she and Brett had driven from Orem to St. George to stay in the house the same Sunday that Stephen went missing. She said that although they rented out rooms in the house, they kept the master bedroom locked so they would have a place to stay when they traveled and they could save money on hotels. Tina said that when they got there to the house in St. George, she peeked into Stephen's room and saw that it was clean and tidy and a lot of his stuff was in there. Now, why would Tina look into Stephen's room? I don't know, right? By this time, no one knew he was missing. So was she just being nosy? On December 24th, Tina wrote that the Koecher family did suspect foul play. And she revealed that someone had used Stephen's phone the morning after he was last seen. Now, I was aware of this call, but in all the media about this case, it was reported that the call had been to Stephen's own voicemail. Even in the Discovery Plus documentary they did on this case, Stephen's own parents say, he called his voicemail. And of course, that's still a mystery. Why is Stephen calling his voicemail? He's disappeared. He's nowhere to be found. But not as much of a mystery as what it actually turned out to be. So this call was made on Monday, December 14th, 2009 at 7:04 a.m., and it's the last activity on Stephen Koecher's cell phone. When the call was made, the phone pinged near the I-15 Russell area in Vegas. So Stephen walked away from his car in Sun City Anthem, never to be seen again. We don't know what happened to him, but we do know his phone left that area. Like I said, we'd all thought that it was Stephen or, even someone else checking Stephen's voicemail, but Tina Bishop said that the call was to an AT&T voicemail retrieval service. So the person who had the phone could have been checking any voicemail. Now, in the police report, the number that this person dialed is redacted, but in other areas of the police report, Stephen's own cell phone number is not redacted several times. So we can only assume that this call was not Stephen or someone else calling Stephen's voicemail, because why redact it if that was the case? So this phone number definitely leads back to somebody, but who? It's redacted. We don't know. If it was just a random AT&T voicemail retrieval number, why would the police redact it? Now, this call only lasted 10 seconds and then nothing. After that, the phone died. Tina also focused a lot on Jordan Zirkle in her posts, even though he never met her, right? She focuses on him and talks about him so much that it seems obvious to me that Tina was trying to get people online who we know are notoriously passionate about solving these cases to look in Jordan's direction and maybe look away from herself and her husband. That's just my opinion, though. Tina said that Jordan was not such a great person. And after Stephen vanished, Jordan himself had quickly moved out of the state and stayed on the move. She said, quote, "The roommate is not missing as in a missing persons. He just moved away rather quickly and was not very cooperative with the investigation, but not enough to appear suspicious, I guess," end quote. But as we know, Jordan talked to the police twice, and they found him to be very cooperative and not deceptive at all. And he moved out of the house before Stephen went missing. And yes, he did end up moving back to Illinois, I believe, where he got a job working at a car repair shop, but he's never tried to hide where he is. And it's important to note that he was very willing to talk to Aaron Stoner and answer questions, whereas Brett and Tina Bishop never have. They never talked to anybody. Discovery Plus wanted to interview them for their film on Stephen, and Tina said that she and Brett said no because it wasn't in their travel or budget plans to take a 4-hour drive from Orem to St. George, and they didn't really want to be on TV anyways. On January 15th, 2010, Tina posted that Brett Bishop had spoken to Stephen Koecher a few days before Stephen went missing. She also wrote that she and her husband were not concerned about Stephen being behind on the rent because he and Brett had worked something out, and Stephen was going to be paid up by January. They worked something out. Stephen and Brett worked something out. Now, according to Stephen's cell phone records, there was no call or text to or from Brett Bishop just a few days before Stephen's disappearance, which would have been around, the 10th, 11th. So if Stephen did speak to Brett, it was not on his own cell phone. However, like I said, if we go a few days back from the 13th to December 10th, we know that Stephen took a weird and unexplained trip out to Ruby Ranch, Nevada, where he told the parents of his ex-girlfriend that he was heading to Sacramento, California to visit with family, but Stephen did not go to Sacramento, and he didn't have family in Sacramento. On the way back from Ruby Ranch, however, Stephen did stop at a Flying J travel center in Springville, Utah, and at this time, the Bishops, Brett and Tina, were living in Orem, Utah. Their address was just about a 13-minute drive away from that Flying J. So maybe Stephen and Brett did have a conversation about the rent and how Stephen was going to pay it back, how exactly he was going to do that. But if it happened, it obviously happened in person, because we don't see any records that Brett spoke to Stephen. Now, maybe Stephen went to the Orem house, or maybe Brett just met him in Springville. But why did Stephen take this trip to begin with, and why was this conversation so important and time-sensitive that it had to be done in person hours away from where Stephen lived in St. George, especially considering that the Bishops are all worried about him paying the rent, or as they said, they're not worried, but they knew he was good for it. They're all worried about him paying the rent. They want him to obviously pay the rent, but he's broke, and they're going to ask him to spend gas money to drive 4 hours? So what kind of arrangement did Brett and Stephen make? And it seemed that other people had this question as well, because in May of 2011, Tina answered a question about Stephen's back rent, and she said, quote, "I don't think there was a specific payment plan set to catch up on the rent just for him to pay as much as he could. He stopped answering Brett's calls, so we went down there to see if he had moved out, but his things were there," end quote. Oh, okay. So the reason Brett and Tina Bishop went to the St. George house on Sunday, December 13th, was because Stephen was, 3 months behind on his rent, and he wasn't answering their calls and texts, and they were very worried that maybe he'd skipped out. Rightly so. Okay, I get it. Now, in order for the Bishops to make this 4-hour drive from Orem to St. George, you'd assume that there had to have been a lot of calls and texts not answered for them to worry so much and drive out there, right? But wait, didn't Tina say in a previous post that Brett had talked to Stephen about the rent just a couple days before Stephen went missing? And Stephen had reassured them that he was going to make good on it, and they were reassured and they had believed him? Because remember, Brett Bishop told the police that he wasn't worried because he knew Stephen would pay up. So you have this conversation on the 10th. And then 3 days later, you become so worried after non-contact that you drive 4 hours to see if Stephen's moved out without paying rent? And you're so worried that you're calling his parents to let them know that he hasn't paid the rent? Also, looking at the phone records for Stephen, you really can't find these multiple attempts to contact him that Tina claims Brett made. The ones that prompted them to drive from Orem to St. George. Maybe the calls were made from Tina's phone, but her number doesn't show up either. And she posted online that she'd never called Stephen directly and that Brett Bishop would only call Stephen once or twice a month, usually to discuss roommates moving in or out or to talk about problems with appliances. So it's normal for Brett to only call Stephen once or twice a month. But in the week before Stephen went missing, Brett reached out to him 5 times. Call logs show that on December 7th, Brett sent a text message to Stephen at 8:15 a.m. and again at 11:50 a.m. He also texted again the next morning at 8:23 a.m. On the day Stephen went missing, Brett also called him at 4:36 p.m. and again around 8 a.m. the next morning. This would be on top of the December 10th conversation about rent. But for me to drive 4 hours because I suspect that my tenant hasn't paid the rent and he may just be leaving without paying the rent, I'm probably going to call you. I'm going to blow up your phone like 10, 11, 12, 15 times. And then if you don't answer, I might start to think that you're skipping out on the rent. But they didn't do that, right? On the day Stephen went missing, there's just 2 calls or texts to him from Brett. That's not a lot of times to attempt to reach out to somebody before driving 4 hours. I mean, maybe Stephen was taking a nap. Maybe he was at his parents' house for dinner or lunch or with a girl or with his friends and he didn't see his phone. Maybe he was playing basketball. His phone was in his gym bag. You don't just drive 4 hours because somebody doesn't respond to you twice. I mean, you can, but it's crazy. So Brett only talked to Stephen once or twice a month, usually, but in the week before he disappeared, Brett is blowing up Stephen's phone. What did he want to talk to him about? If Stephen had already made it clear during that December 10th meeting/conversation that he was going to pay the rent back by January, and the Bishops believed him. So what was Brett calling to discuss with Stephen if the issue of the rent had already been laid to rest, which even Brett said it was? Appliance problems? Roommates moving in and out? What was he trying so hard to get a hold of him for? In January of 2010, Tina Bishop posted this on Web Sleuths, quote, Brett wasn't planning on evicting Stephen, but with Christmas around the corner and having to make our own rent payment where we are now living and our house payment along with both sets of utilities because Jordan Zirkle bailed and Stephen was behind, neither had paid their share of utilities, we were falling behind on our bills. Brett decided to give Stephen's parents a call, which Stephen did not know about, to see if Stephen had asked for help with money. I'm sure it upset Stephen to know Brett had called his mom and told her he was behind on rent, end quote. Once again, Brett Bishop told police he was not worried that Stephen wouldn't pay what he owed, and he knew it would be paid back in January, but here Tina reveals that it did look as if they were putting a bit of pressure on Stephen as they approached Christmas and felt that they themselves were tight on money. Tina posted constantly about Jordan Zirkle. She made his criminal history available on these forums. She posted what he looked like, what kind of cars he was known to drive. She said he'd moved out in November without paying rent, and the police said they found weed in his room, and she speculated about Jordan possibly being a drug dealer. She wrote that maybe Stephen had been planning a trip to Sacramento, and even though we know Stephen didn't go to Sacramento and would have no reason to, Tina talks about Sacramento a lot. She wondered if Jordan had ties to the area, which at that time was the epicenter of the legal medical marijuana industry, and she says this. She says, isn't pot legal there? In my opinion, this is projection, as we know that she knew pot was legal there since months before a medical marijuana card from California with Brett Bishop's name on it was found in her home, along with weed and things to smoke weed with. So she's over here acting like she's just a tourist in this whole marijuana business, when actually she and her husband lived full-time in a world where they were very familiar with marijuana, how to get it, and where it could be found. After speculating about Jordan's possible involvement with dealing drugs, Tina Bishop posted just 2 or 3 days later that an Orem police officer had told her that Jordan Zirkle was one of the biggest drug dealers in St. George. So riddle me this, Batman. How does an Orem police officer know anything about who the biggest drug dealers are in a town 4 hours away from the one he works in? And what is this huge drug kingpin doing, renting a room in a house from Brett Bishop and working a full-time job if he's such a successful drug dealer? And once again, projection, since it was Tina's husband who months before had been found with pot and a plethora of prescription medication that did not belong to him and a Porsche that didn't belong to him. I don't think he was using it all for himself, the pills. It's more likely that he was selling these pills, allegedly, in my opinion. So one second, Tina's like, maybe Jordan's a drug dealer. And a few days later, she gets confirmation from a cop that she never names that he actually is, like, this huge drug dealer. How convenient. How convenient.
Listen, I don't know if you've seen it, but his wife really just went off on you, and it's.
I know. I seen your messages about I was the drug dealer and all that stuff. Yeah, I smoked weed, but I didn't sell no drugs.
So some users on these message boards, they confronted Tina and they accused her and Brett of having something to do with what happened to Stephen Koecher. She responded that, it'd be kind of hard to get their money back if they did something to Stephen. She said that her husband is a nice guy, sometimes too nice, and he has such a big heart that sometimes he gets taken advantage of. If he wasn't so nice, he would have called Stephen's parents way sooner. In Tina's last post in February of 2012, she wrote, quote, "I do not think Stephen is the type to knowingly participate in illegal activities. I do, however, think that he, as many, could be, given the right circumstances, duped into something illegal or a situation where he could be taken advantage of." End quote. Jordan Zirkle told Aaron Stoner something very similar. He said that Stephen was not the type of person to willingly involve himself with anything illegal, like selling drugs or pills. So if he was doing something like that, he either didn't know what he was carrying and being asked to deliver, or he'd been threatened or forced in some way.
All this came to him, like the pills and stuff. Stephen wouldn't have to be forced, or like you guys said, he owed Brett money to do anything like that. Like, that's not the type of person he was. He didn't cuss, he didn't drink, he didn't do any of that. Stephen, all he did is, he came home, he worked, he stayed in his room. He never, came out in the house and hung out with us, 'cause I always had friends there. He never hung out or any of that stuff with us. But, we played softball with him a couple times at his church with his softball. He was real big into playing softball. For Stephen to do anything to deliver pills or anything, it would have to be forced on him. He's not that, literally, he is not that. I didn't, when I first found out about all this stuff, about the pills and all that stuff, I'm like, see, Stephen being Mormon and not cussing, not drinking, we've also asked him if he wanted a beer every now and then, and no, he wouldn't always know, didn't cuss, none of that stuff. So it all highly weirds me out about if it has to do with the pill relation, our pills, or if he was doing something for Brett. That's just weird to me, because the way Stephen was and who he is. I've always, to this day, ever since I found out about this, Brett definitely has to have something to do with it, or something.
And that brings us to my personal theory. Because the police have never investigated this case as thoroughly as they should have, there's no connection that we know of between Brett Bishop and Mark DiMaggio. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that there could be, if you know where to look, and you looked hard enough, which the police didn't do. If Brett was stealing these pills from the pharmacy, he was most likely selling them. Jordan believes Brett could have been using the Arizona Strip to make these deliveries, since it's off the beaten path, but you can get to a lot of places by driving through it. We know when Stephen was seen on surveillance walking towards evening lights, he was carrying something that could have been a thin envelope, maybe. Maybe it contained something that he was supposed to deliver. Maybe he'd gone on trips to make deliveries like these before, such as his strange one-day over 1,000-mile trip to Ruby Ranch, where he made a few stops on the way. And there are hours where he's unaccounted for, and we don't know why else he could have possibly been in that area, because he wasn't going to Sacramento. Or his trip a few days before he went missing that brought him to Mesquite, an area where you can access the Arizona Strip. I can't say for sure whether Stephen knew what he was delivering. If this is actually what happened, right? It's just a theory, remember, I'm not accusing anyone. Stephen was desperate for money. He was having no luck finding a job. And his landlord, Brett Bishop, was putting the pressure on. I mean, imagine Brett Bishop's telling him, in December, Christmas is coming up, and we're paying, your rent and your utilities and ours, and we just really can't do this anymore. Somebody like Stephen would have felt guilty by that. So even if the pressure wasn't overt, we need you to pay the rent or you're out, it came there maybe in a passive-aggressive sort of guilt trip. Brett called Stephen's parents the first week of December, and by December 10th, Stephen was making his first long and unexplained drive through multiple states with no clear reason for him to do so, and that December 10th trip also brought him within 13 minutes of Brett Bishop's Orem home. Could Stephen have made the trip to drop something off to someone Brett had introduced him to or instructed him to go see? And on his way back to St. George, he met up with Brett to give him the cash from that delivery? Maybe Brett had told Stephen, listen, I know it's hard right now, I know it's hard to get a job, and I don't want to kick you out, man. I like you. I know you're a good person. I know you're good for it. But hey, if you make a couple deliveries for me, I'll knock some money off each time. Make your life easier. Win-win. I truly don't think that Stephen knew what he was delivering. I don't think he knew what he was delivering were pills, or maybe he thought that he was bringing the pills to legitimate people, like customers, since Brett had been affiliated with an actual pharmacy. Either way, on December 13th, when Stephen drove to Las Vegas, he was clearly going there to see someone and do something, and he never left. It's possible that this was another trip to deliver something like pills or cash or whatever, but this time it went wrong. Maybe he encountered somebody in that neighborhood. Most likely the person he was sent there to meet, possibly even Mark DiMaggio, who was living just right around the corner from where Stephen parked his car. I do not believe that Stephen Koecher is alive out there, hiding from the family that he loved so much. He had no plans to disappear. On December 10th, when he talked to his father, Stephen had been out grocery shopping. And in one of her online posts, Tina Bishop herself says that it doesn't make sense why he would buy so much food if he wasn't going to be around to eat it, especially because he was so strapped for cash. He bought like big blocks of cheese, like the 3-pound ones that he never touched. A big jug of juice, like the Great Value Walmart one, that was never touched. A big jar of peanut butter that appeared to have only been used once. The week before Stephen went missing, Brett Bishop called Stephen's parents, and then Stephen had his father and his mother worried about him, offering to send him money, which he declined, putting money in his bank account, which he would not use. Did this call from Brett to the Koechers push Stephen to the edge where he realized that he had to do something to make some money so that he wouldn't have to accept help from his family and burden them? So maybe in a heightened state of desperation, Stephen ignored his better judgment and started helping Brett Bishop run pills over multiple states. Maybe he didn't know what he was doing was illegal, which I believe could also be very true. Maybe when Stephen met with whoever he was scheduled to meet with in Henderson, the person made a comment that suggested that what Stephen had signed up to do was not legal. And Stephen panicked. He freaked out. He yelled at this person. He was like, I didn't know that I was doing this. Like, what did you guys get me involved with? I can't believe that this happened. And the person he was meeting with was like, well, this guy's going to be a problem. He needs to go. There's also a theory going around that Stephen Koecher had run away with Susan Powell, and this theory was started by none other than Stephen Powell, Susan's creepy-ass father-in-law. Susan Powell went missing from Utah. I believe it was just like around the same time Stephen Koecher went missing, maybe even the week before. So Stephen Powell called the police, and he was like, I think my daughter-in-law ran away with Stephen Koecher because she's a horrible person and she's, destroyed her family, and now she's trying to make my son look guilty for her murder. And then on a website that was created and run by the Powells, Steve and his son Josh, Susan's husband, said that Susan and Stephen, they were around the same age. They were both Mormons. They were both in West Valley City the week of their disappearances in December of 2009. Susan probably ran off with Stephen to Brazil where they could start a new life together. This whole bizarre story, in my opinion, was an attempt to do two things. One, continue smearing Susan Powell's name, something that Josh and Steve had made a full-time job of, and I think they really enjoyed, actually. And two, an attempt to get the heat off of Josh Powell. Because we all know that dude killed his wife, okay? And at the time that Stephen Powell called the police about this potential connection, it was a year after Susan and Stephen Koecher had gone missing in December of 2009, and the cops were breathing down Josh's neck like everybody knew what he did. Making this story up would make Susan look like a bad mother, a woman who abandoned her children to run off with her boyfriend, and it would also get the public and law enforcement looking in a different direction, away from Josh Powell. The families of Stephen Koecher and Susan Powell say there's no truth to the story. There's no real connection. Law enforcement connected to both cases got together. They talked, they had meetings, they pursued this possible lead only to find out there was nothing to it. So is it an interesting story? Yes. I wish that Susan Powell and Stephen Koecher were living in Brazil. I 1,000,000% wish that was true. But unfortunately, it is a work of fiction, just like everything else that Steve Powell concocted in his frenzied banana split of a brain. And now I pass it off to you. What do you think happened to Stephen Koecher? Do you think my theory makes sense? Are there holes in my theory? Are there any other theories that you might have? To me, it was pretty clear that Stephen never intended to be gone from home for more than a day. He'd shopped for a ton of groceries. He was planning to go home for Christmas. He'd purchased Christmas presents for his brother's kids. He had scheduled a tutoring appointment with a woman at his church the same day that he went missing, the 13th. He left his belongings behind, his clothes, his computer, his cell phone charger. His cell phone has never showed up. It's clear from looking at his cell phone records that his phone did travel somewhere after his car was abandoned in that cul-de-sac. And if Stephen was with it, I don't think he was alive. There's a 4-hour gap between when he's last seen on surveillance and when his phone pings off the American Pacific Tower at around 4:30, and that ping was recorded because of a phone call or text from Brett Bishop. Where the phone was the next day when someone used it to call that AT&T voicemail retrieval number, we also don't know. The police claimed they called AT&T to get this location, but they were told that due to a glitch or a problem in the system, the location was not recorded. And AT&T was like, I know that this sucks, this is unfortunate, but we can't get that location, which is so, like, I can't even say it's convenient because I don't know how this would be purposely done, but it's just so bizarre. Like, how ironic that the one location you would really, really, really want is just, like, gone with the wind, like a ghost. AT&T can't find it. As the night of the 13th continued on, Stephen's phone continued to ping off of different towers, but his car was still sitting in that cul-de-sac. It's a mystery, but I truly hope that one day it's solved, and whoever did this to him, whether it be one person or multiple people, I hope they get true justice, because he was just a guy trying to do the best with the cards he was dealt, trying to be a grown-up, not depend on his parents to live. His journals showed that in the months leading up to his disappearance, Stephen had two main things on his mind, two main goals: find a job and fall in love. Those are not the goals of a man who's planning to end it all, but they might be the goals of a man who is desperate enough to trust the wrong person because he was out of options. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Let me know in the comments what you think. Like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are already subscribed, make sure you still are, because YouTube likes to unsubscribe people from my channel all the time. That's okay, though. We're in this together. If I don't have them on my side, at least I have you guys. Check the description box for links. Don't forget to check out my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host with retired police detective Derek Levasseur. New episodes come out every Friday on podcast platforms and every Wednesday on YouTube. So I'm going to put the links in the description box so you can go and follow both of those. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe.
The battle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood.